A young woman looked at the forest in front of her smiling eagerly, with a dangerous look in her eyes. The woman looked like an Olympic athlete, with black shorts, a black sports bra, covering a body that looked like it was made of pure muscle. Her most notable traits, however, were her cat-like attributes, those being her black tail, and black cat ears onto of her black hair, which was styled into a ponytail. Alright. I finally found it. Who knew all I had to do was look online? The woman said in a gruff, but somehow at the same time bubbly voice. Well, can't waste any more time. Let's go. And with that, the woman got down on all fours and leapt into the woods at astonishing speeds, completely missing the sign that said not to enter, lest intruders get attacked. XXXXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, in Izuku's office, Izuku was looking through some papers, when suddenly the nearby seer went up to him. Izuku turned his attention to the seer. The seer then displayed an image of a cat-horked woman running through the forest at high speeds, so much so that the seer that was watching her couldn't keep up, and she ran out of sight. An intruder? Izuku's eyes widened in alarm before a serious expression overtook him. What could she want? Could this be another assassin, HM? Well, let's hope that our security system works as well as it did last time. XXXXXXXXX. As the woman ran through the forest on all fours, she heard something with her incredibly keen sense of hearing. Footsteps. Animal footsteps, and a lot of them, closing on her. Actually, she could also faintly hear something bellow her, and something flying through the air, both in between the trees and up in the sky. She looked to the side and saw a hint of the sabers that were fast approaching her. Oh, those are what they called. Those shadow monsters. The woman looked frustrated, as for whatever reason she couldn't remember the name of these monsters, before figuratively shrugging it off. Ah, who cares? The real question is, why are they chasing me? Oh, this must be a test. I know what to do here. The woman then pounced to the side, jumping on top of Saber, and biting into its neck, her feline teeth ripping apart its flesh with ease, and killing it swiftly. The other sabers that were following suddenly stopped, before turning around, and running away. They're running away? The woman tilted her head in confusion. Why? Rah! Suddenly a fleet griffin leaped down, intent on landing on the woman and holding her down, only for the woman to backflip onto the closest one's back, and bite into its neck, killing it as well, before landing on the ground. She then quickly turned and jumped up, her nails turning into sharp claws, that tore into the sides of the griffins, as she used the griffins as footstools to reach the rest of them, and slice through them with her claws. After cutting through about a dozen of them, she finally reached the final one and slashed its neck, killing it. Of course, now this meant she was plummeting to the ground, but she didn't seem too concerned. Once she got enough, she sunk her claws into the closest tree, which slowed her fall as she slid back to the forest floor, her claws leaving deep marks in the tree as she fell. The woman landed on her feet and took her claws out of the tree. Then, she heard something tunneling out of the ground around her, and creeps crawled out of the dirt around her, surrounding her completely. The woman smiled, and readied her claws, before jumping forward. She grabbed the creep by the mouth, and using her momentum, she flips it upside down and then slashes its exposed underside apart. They never stood a chance. XXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku watched as the woman tore apart the level 1 Grim with ease. Like a tiger ripping apart rabbits. Alright, seems this is going to be an issue. He considered just skipping security level 2 and heading to level 3. After all, it seems like this woman was rather tough, and was approaching rather quickly. Well, it'll take some time for the level 3 Grim to approach, Izuku said to himself, before speaking into the seer. Send the level 2 Grim. And get the level 3 Grim ready for deployment. XXXXXXXXXXX. The woman was once again running on all fours towards the house when she heard more enemies coming towards her. Then, in front of her came a swarm of ravagers, screaming at her. Ow! The woman winced as the sound hit her ears, causing her to fold them down. She grit her teeth in anger, and bared her teeth at the swarm, ready to tear them apart. She jumped into the swarm, claws out, and slashed at the area around her, tearing apart dozens of the bat-like Grim, before doing it again and tearing apart another dozen. The ravagers all came at her, attempting to swarm her, and bit and slash into her flesh, but she tore them apart with her claws so easily and with such speed, that it became difficult for them to get close, and any that did, she grabbed with her mouth, before biting down on them with her fangs, crushing them in her jaw. All in all, the swarm only held her in place for a few minutes and didn't get more than a couple of scratches in before they went down. Once the swarm had been dealt with, the woman proceeded to keep going on, running. She ran forward into a clearing, where she found 5 Borbotusks and a pack of 10 Beowulfs coming at her. The Borbotusks were rolling towards her Sonic the Hedgehog style and approaching her quickly. She just grinned and charged forward even faster. Then just as the two were about to collide, she reached forward, grabbed its tusks, and jumped, leaping upwards and taking the Borbotusk with her, flipping in the air, and turning the Borbotusk over, before slamming it down onto its back as she landed. She then slashed its exposed underbelly open, killing it as the other Borbotusks rolled past. The other 4 Borbotusks stopped, uncurling before charging at her. However, the woman was much faster, and she rushed past them, sinking her claws in the small lines of unguarded fur on their back, and making deep slashes in them as she ran past, killing 2 more of them. She then ran over to one of the other Borborusk and lunged forward, and thrust her claws into its side, nearly impaling the monster, killing it with ease, before running over to the last one, and kicking it over, and sinking her claws into its exposed underside. With the Borbotusk dealt with, that only left the Beowulf pack, which was quickly approaching them. But they were absolutely no issue for her at all, as the woman charged forward at alarming speeds, and expertly slicing through the throats of the wolf Grim as she ran through the pack until she was behind them. In about 5 seconds, she murdered the entire pack. Then, 2 more Grim came into the clearing, Ursus to be specific. The 2 Bear Grim approached the woman, standing up on their hind legs and getting ready to slash at her, only for her to slash open their throats in a second. With those 2 dead, the woman was about to get going. 3 King Taijatu came in from all around her. The one in front of her charged at her with its black head, with its fangs bared. The woman jumped over its attack and landed on its head, and just went to town, slashing away at the back of its head, until it went limp. The white head hissed in pain and went to bite the woman, only for her to kick its lower jaw, deflecting it upwards, and giving her access to its neck, which she promptly tore into, killing it. 1 down, 2 more to go. XXXXXXXXXX. I have definitely underestimated this woman. Izuku thought nervously as he watched her tear him, Grim, apart. She's definitely some kind of assassin. The way she kills these Grim, tearing into their necks and heads. She's like a super predator, actually given her quirk that makes sense. Still, I need to get serious. Switch to level 3 security, Izuku told the seer, just as Ochako burst into his office. Izuku, what's going on? The seers just showed us someone running through the forest. Ochako said with an extremely concerned expression. We have an intruder, Izuku told her urgently. Tell all of your classmates and my mother, and get all the kids inside. On it. Ochako said, turning around and running back out of the room. With Ochako gone, Izuku turned back to the seer. XXXXXXXXX. After disposing of a few more Grim along the way, the woman continued on her path through the forest. Then she heard 2 attacks coming towards her from above. Then 2 fireballs hit the ground behind her, exploding and singeing the ground. She stopped running, and 2 manticores dropped out of the sky right in front of her. The manticores quickly opened fire, shooting out fireballs at the woman, who dodged them all with ease, jumping and flipping from side to side, elegantly yet ferociously avoiding every attack. She then charged forward, ducking under one of the manticore, and then thrusting her arm up through its jaw, impaling its head with her hand. As the Grim died and faded away, the other one started to shoot at her again. The woman then jumped up, before diving down and axe-kicking the manticore's head, caving in its skull with her heel, killing it. The bone wasn't as tough as I thought, the woman said as she got her feet. She then heard the sound of something large coming towards her, on her right. Then 2 bearing elves came charging out of the tree-line and were coming right at her. One charged at her, before jumping up, bringing its arms up intent on smashing her into the ground. However, the woman simply jumped up towards the Berinjal and slashed its throat open. The Berinjal fell to the ground, slumping over before dissipating into smoke, as the woman landed on her feet, and ran at other Berinjal. She got real close to it, and before it could react, she jumped up, flipping on its neck, before slashing this one's neck as well, killing it. The woman jumped off the dying Grim, once again, gracefully landing on her feet. Well, this is a great workout, the woman said cheerfully, as she wiped some sweat off her forehead. What a fun test. After taking a minute to stretch, she got back on all fours and started running. XXXXXXXXX. Eventually, the woman made her way to another clearing. However, this was a dead end, as she was faced with a steep cliffside. The woman stared at the cliffside for a moment. I wonder dash. Before she could finish her thoughts, she heard something beneath her. She jumped back, as a blind worm shot out of the ground. Rah! The blind worm screamed at her, before burying itself back into the ground. She could barely hear it, tunneling under her, coming towards her. Its predictability would be its downfall. When she heard it start coming back up, she jumped back a bit, dodging as it burst out of the ground. Then she quickly jumped at it, digging her claws into its exposed belly, and tearing a hole in its flesh open, that was big enough for her to crawl inside, which she did. Rag! The blind worm thrashed about in pain, as it felt the woman tear up its insides, until eventually, it flopped onto the ground, and turned into smoke, eventually releasing the woman. Wasn't as bad as I thought. The woman said, as all the grim guts dissipated off her. Thought that would be grosser. As she dusted herself off, she looked back at the cliff. I wonder if I can dash. Once again her thought was interrupted, as she heard something coming towards her. Something really big, and something really slow. It would likely take whatever that was a few minutes to get towards her, and she could easily avoid it. But where was the fun in that? Instead, she decided to take a bit of a break, catch her breath, do some stretches. She had no idea how long this test would be, so it was important to pace herself. And so after a few minutes of rest, it came. The Goliath. Oh, you are a big boy. The woman licked her lips in anticipation. Let's go. The Goliath charged at her. At the same time, the woman also charged at it. She jumped up onto its back, turned around, and went to slash at the back of its neck. Since it was thick, it took a lot of slashes, but since the Goliath was so slow and heavy, it's not like it had any way to get her off its back. So all it could do was scream in pain and run around, as the woman's claws dug into it. After half a minute, she managed to do enough damage to kill the thing, causing it to collapse and dissipate. Wow, that thing's skin was pretty tough, the woman said, before turning back to the cliff. Alright, let's go. The woman then ran up to the cliff, and jumped onto the side, embedding her claws into the rock, before climbing up the cliff. XXXXXXXXXXX. After getting to another clearing, the woman sat down behind a rock. Phew. Man, this forest is big. She sat down for a bit, resting her feet after all that running and fighting, before looking towards the forest. Hey, you've been following me for a while. Do you want to fight or something? There was a short pause, before suddenly she used her hands to push herself up into the air, dodging an invisible slash attack that created 4 claw marks in the rock behind her. The woman landed on the rock, grinning down at her invisible attacker. Nice try, but I can hear you. It was then that the hound made itself visible, standing on all fours, and glaring upwards at her. Then, the woman jumped up and went to kick the thing in the head, but the hound jumped back, avoiding the attack. The hound then changed its form, standing upright, before reeling its arm back, and then shooting it forward, its arm extending like one of Kyosei's tendrils. The woman then ducked under its stretchy arm, and slashed it apart, as she ran towards the hound. She got up close to the creature and was about to slash at its neck when suddenly, a thick piece of armor grew there. Of course, she slashed at it anyway. However, the armor proved to be too tough, and while she did leave a few claw marks, it was nothing too deep. The hound then swung its head down, intent on taking a bite out of her shoulder. She dropped to the floor to avoid the bite, and then rolled over to the side, before jumping back onto her feet. There she saw that the claw marks she left in the hound's armored neck was healing rapidly until was good as new. Oh, this thing is gonna be tough. The woman smirked, before getting into an offensive stance. Alright, let's test the limits of your healing, shall we? Bush. The woman dashed forward, going much faster than she had been before, meaning she wasn't holding back. In a flash, she ran past the hound, slashing its chest, before quickly circling around, running back, and slashing it again, before turning back around, and running back at it, this time slashing its back. The woman ran circles around the hound, slashing up its body heavily. However, the hound seemed mostly unaffected, despite taking massive injuries, although these injuries didn't last long, as it regenerated very quickly. Seeing as her opponent seemed mostly unaffected by her attacks, she decided it was time to go for a fatal blow. She jumped back, before doing some backflips away from the hound, before getting into a pouncing stance, and then launching herself at the Grim with explosive power. Shink! She thrust her arm right through its heart, impaling him like a spear. And the hound looked about as unaffected by this as it did by the rest of her attacks. In fact, this attack would prove to be a huge error, as the woman felt the hound's body hardened, both inside and out, as more armor formed around her arm, locking it in place. Oh shit! The woman said, realizing that this mistake, as she tried to pull her arm out, to no avail. Shit, 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 shit. The hound raised it up, its arms ready to attack the woman. However, she used her other arm, to quickly cut both its arm off. She then jumped up, getting her feet onto its chest, as she tried to force her arm out of its chest. And after some pushing, she finally managed to dislodge her arm from the monster. She fell to the ground, backflipping away from the monster once more. Alright. So attacking its body is no good. No matter how fast I attack it, it'll just keep regenerating. But it has to have a weakness. Let's try its head. The hound grew its arms, and in fact, it grew some more arms as well, 2 more to be precise, right in its chest. All 4 arms shot out, extending to try and catch the woman in her claws. The woman shot forward, ducking under one of the arms, and slashing it, before ducking to the left to dodge another one, and then jumping up to dodge the 3rd arm, before kicking away the last arm that came for her midair. She dived down at the hound with her claws pointed at its head. The hound jumped back to avoid her, however, the woman simply lunged forward at it, and landed on its chest, while grabbing its head. She then dug her claws into the side of its neck and started trying to pull its head off. Meanwhile, the hound's 4 extended arms grew back, and turned around, before rocketing towards the woman that was ripping his head off. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr final pull, she ripped its head off. Fortunately, after this happened, the hound's body went limp and started to fade into smoke. That's not to say the hound was dead, its head was still very much alive, and snarling the woman. The woman saw that it was quickly growing back its body. If she left it alone, he'd probably fully heal back its body in a minute or two. Not that she'd let it. She immediately dropped his head to the ground, and stepped on it, slowly crushing its skull, until, splat, she crushed its head, and the brain that was inside. Ew. The woman said as realized she got child brain all over her foot. As she wiped the brains of a 7-year-old boy off her foot and onto the grass, a seer watched her from the shadows. XXXXXXXXXX. Okay, so she defeated a hound. Crap. Alright. No more holding back. Izuka said to the seer. She wants a fight. Then she'll get one. Initiate security level 4, and get the other 2 hounds. He would not have his family threatened. Even if he had to unleash hell on this woman. Hopefully, she'd survive at the very least.